So, as a heads up, this episode of Change Signal might just upend your whole approach to transformation and change management. Or at least, it might make your brain melt just a little bit. I'm Michael Bungay-Stanier. Dr. Jason Fox is about to stir things up for us. If you're drowning in scenario planning and strategies that are aging like milk, then Dr. Jason Fox is your man. He is a philosopher, he is a wizard, and he can cast some deep magic. One key spell: develop organizational and change capabilities that have you better able to detect weak signals as to what's really happening. The danger often lies in getting too comfortable with the obvious. So, are you brave enough to go seeking the unknown unknowns? Here we go. I'm Michael Bungay-Stanier. This is Change Signal, the podcast where we cut through the blather and the BS and the noise to find the good stuff that works in change management. I'm really excited to introduce you to Dr. Jason Fox. He is, well, first of all, you need to know he is a great friend of mine. I love Jason. He is also a philosopher, a PhD, a rogue, an author, a speaker, a trickster, a wizard. He's also a bastion against the trivial and the simplistic and the inhuman. And that's important because trivial, simplistic, and inhuman way too often is the experience of change. Now, I think Jason's going to be a recurring guest on the pod. That's the plan. But I want to introduce him to you today and now in a slightly unexpected way. I want you to listen to his podcast, or at least some of it. Now, his podcast is called Fox Wizard. That's all one word, so you can find it on your podcast platform of choice. But the word I'm going to use to describe it is erratic. That means, first of all, it's not on a regular schedule. It also means that it is freewheeling, because Jason will move from idea to insight in a way that is eclectic and deeply knowing, and honestly, for me at least, at times elusive. Also, an erratic is a boulder dropped by a retreating glacier. So hiking along in the country, as Jason does, I do too, you'll find this form in the landscape that stops you in your tracks. I think that can happen in a conversation with Jason. You'll just bump into something that will make you go, oh, okay, I have to think about that in a new and different way. Now, I'll be jumping in at various places throughout this episode, sharing some thoughts and questions as Jason talks about uncertainty versus ambiguity, a strategy, picking up weak signals, what it really means to not stare into the bright, shiny light, but to look at the shadows around that. It's a provocative, elusive, wise episode. It comes from his episode number 5 of his podcast, which is called Void Hunting, if you want to track it down. Now, we start with a die in our hands.
Imagine you have a die in your hand. You roll the die. It's one of 6 possible outcomes here, each equally likely. It's relatively straightforward. If you were navigating uncertainty, as the consultants like to say, then you can do scenario planning. You can come up with a scenario for what to do if it's a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 6. Now, if we were to complicate things a little bit and add an additional die and add the 2 dice together to create the sum of the 2, then if you do this enough times and roll enough dice, you'll start to realize that there's a pattern to be discerned. The number 7 is the most likely result you'll see. And this means then, from a strategic perspective, you can start to factor in probability. You can take a Bayesian approach. You can say, okay, well, here we are with the business, or here we are with the organization. This is the most likely, the most probable outcome here. But let's also consider a few edge cases, just in case things don't turn out exactly as we had planned. And so then we do the scenario planning for the edge cases. What happens if we get a 2? What happens if we get a 12? Very unlikely. But maybe we'll get a 6 or an 8 or a 5 or a 9. So what do we do if that happens? And so folks will spend their time doing the scenario planning, and this leads to a wondrous illusion of certainty and control and clarity as a we've put in the work, we've been very thorough, we've mapped out the scenario. From a Parkinson's law perspective, where work expands to fill the time allocated, consulting firms can invest a lot of time to come up with various scenarios and present them in beautiful PowerPoint slides and PDF decks with the stock photography of if this and that and so on. And yeah, everyone feels good because we put a lot of work into this. I think you can sense where I'm going here.
I like how Jason's setting this up, kind of puncturing the illusion of control. Or perhaps to just put it slightly differently, he's questioning what it means to navigate uncertainty. And he's going to go deeper into this now.
Navigating uncertainty is a blinkered approach. It's good, it's needed, but it's very limited. It's not the pathway to strategic differentiation. And it can delude us into feeling as though we're prepared, which then perhaps leads us to be less effective when the context changes. And if there's one thing I'm certain about at the moment is that we are entering a period of volatility within the world, geopolitically, within business, artificial intelligence, exponential disruption, ecological devastation, meta-crisis, etc. We are in immense volatility. And so therefore, I'm incredibly dubious about scenario planning alone. It's an important thing, but it's not the only thing. With scenario planning and approaching the concept of navigating uncertainty, it's like we're proceeding through a fog. And, there were multiple pathways within the fog. We can't see the pathways yet, but once the fog clears or once we navigate it, the path will reveal itself. And that's fine, assuming that there are already paths there, and assuming that people have already gone ahead and mapped the path for you. The term navigating, I'm also not so sure of. I'm okay with it if we are navigating via poetic sensibilities, via mythical sensibilities, where we're consulting the stars, the gods, our intuition. But if we're kind of thinking about it in terms of a map, then that presumes that someone's already gone forward into the future and mapped the territory so that we can follow this map or navigate at least by, maybe we take an orienteering approach. We can at least have some mimetic kind of symbols. If this happens or if that emerges, then we get some reference points. That's fine, I guess. But the point here is that uncertainty is not enough. We can't just navigate uncertainty. Ambiguity is where I'd like to take this conversation.
So moving from uncertainty to ambiguity, I find this a helpful distinction right away because they're different. But before we go there, and Jason's going to go further here, I know for some of you, when Jason says, look, I'm okay if we navigate via poetic sensibilities, via mythic sensibilities, consulting the stars and the gods and our intuition. Well, I know some of you are probably raising your eyebrows and going, what does that mean? I say stick with it, or perhaps even better metaphor, flow with it. Because this might actually be for you the experience of ambiguity, just what Jason's talking about. And it actually can be helpful to feel in your body your reaction to that and what it means to stay present to that. Not all of what Jason says, I confess, I fully grasp, but I sense there's wisdom here.
See, uncertainty is known unknowns within a closed system. So it presumes that you know the system, you know everything. And this appeals to the engineer, the programmer, the coder, the masculine urge to dominate and to map and to kind of to know the things. But it doesn't deal with the unknown unknowns. And some of you might be thinking, well, what can we do? We don't know the unknowns. We might as well work with what we got. And yes, that's true. My suggestion here is that alongside complementing the navigating uncertainty and all your scenario planning and all your default strength, weakness, opportunities, threats, kind of default strategy stuff, is that you will also cultivate the sensibilities and the capabilities to navigate ambiguity, or not even navigate, to sense make, to flourish, to thrive amidst ambiguity and the unknown unknowns. And this is a very different skill set. And even skill set is not quite the right word. It's a very different set of sensibilities. Sensibilities, a skill is great, but knowing when to use the skill and when not to use the skill And when the skill itself may be limited, this is the domain of sensibilities. I'm taking a bit of a meta-rational lens to this. It's not merely enough to simply optimize within the existing system, but one must consider systems beyond the system. And in fact, one must consider paradigms as well. So, ambiguity.
Now, I am grasping here a little, but I do sense there's something useful in understanding the need to develop this sensibility. It's a capacity for noticing and staying present to ambiguity, attuned to weak signals, and how that might actually be more useful than any specific skill set.
Now, sometimes I'm asked, where does strategy come from? Actually, I'm not asked. I wish people asked me that more. But let me just point out the default when it comes to strategy development for most organizations seems to be everyone's really busy all the time. They're overworked. People start to pay attention to some emerging trends. It starts to feel a bit overwhelming. Have you heard about this thing called artificial intelligence? We should probably do something about that. And so we'll get an external consulting firm in to come and talk to us about AI and maybe contribute to our next offsite. And maybe we partner with them. And because of Parkinson's law and scenario planning, we can start to map out all of these edge case scenarios and present, big PowerPoint presentations with lots of details and lots of graphs and come up with big presentation decks and PDFs and so on. It looks like a lot of work is done. Parkinson's law is where work expands to fill the time allocated. And so a lot of expense, and we feel like we know everything, and therefore we can start to map out our strategy. It's not like that at all. Strategy emerges from relationality. Strategy is a living conversation. It's the situational, dispositional acuity that allows for us to orientate towards relevant realization. If you are seeking strategy, what you effectively are seeking to do is to make sure that your business model makes sense with the emerging future.
Now, this is something I want to remember to underline. Strategy is relational. It's a living conversation. It's a way for moving into the future, not just for optimizing the past. And it underlines for me the living conversation piece, the need to do change with people, not to people. Jason has more to say about this.
Of course, the future is not uncertain. It is ambiguous. There are unknown unknowns at play. And so therefore, we might map out some scenarios, but our orientation is to pay attention, to make sense of the complexity of the unfurling emergence. This means that we have an acuity for weak signals. This means, and I'm referencing Dave Snowden's Cynefin model here, but it means that we not only pay attention to what is emerging, we also develop the relationality, the senius, the collective genius, the mutual enthusiasm, the encouragement, the support with our colleagues. And we create space for ambiguity, for the exploration of the unknown unknowns. And in my book, How to Lead a Quest, and the Quest Augmented Strategy Model sees the cultivation of a quiver of options, which are domains that are actively monitored and considered, and should the right conditions manifest, then we can start to experiment with them. And so I've been working with some organizations since 2016 that had already been mapping artificial intelligence, smart contracts with blockchain, many other things. And they are well prepared and have been doing very well based upon the conditions that have manifested, not because they have been planning out specific scenarios, but because they've been paying attention and adopting a disposition that cultivates in-house intelligence and sees the folks as learners that are actively learning, participating and sharing with appropriate epistemological humility and intellectual honesty. And through that and the collegiality and rapport, developing a confidence to discern weak signals, and when multiple weak signals coalesce, to know, I think now's the time for us to start experimenting with this. This leads to strategic differentiation, strategic advantage, and whole new revenue streams and new value and ongoing and enduring relevance.
So when you think about your change strategy and plan, how much of it is based on just the obvious? And how much of it weaves in the weak signals and curiosity and empathy and humility and experimentation?
So I won't go too much into the specifics of the Quest Augmented Strategy Model because I didn't actually intend this to sound like a pitch. What I more want to do is posit the notion that there are many related terms when it comes to ambiguity, uncertainty, the unknown, mystery, and so on. And I think it's useful for us to disambiguate them a little bit, or at least to approach it as we would whiskey tasting notes, or, as I often like to do. So, when we sample uncertainty, for example, it's got a rather mechanical thing. It works with closed systems and so on. Ambiguity being much more living systems, unknown unknowns, open systems, and we're sensing into it. I want to point out just a couple of other things related. Vagueness. A lot of people conflate ambiguity with vagueness. Now, vagueness is useful if you have good collegiality and rapport, if you have the conditions for seniors, mutual encouragement, and so on. Then vagueness is quite permissible. It's okay to be grasping at something. And sometimes concepts themselves haven't quite taken shape yet. And so the words that we use to describe them seem vague. We talk about vibe. We talk about, vibe is great. Vibe is a beautiful word that articulates complex, nonlinear, emergent dynamics that are, if you were to put your finger on anything specific, it seems too weak or too imprecise, or kind of misses the point. I can walk into a room and the vibe is off. And, if I was to articulate what's going on here, it's partly because of the artificial lighting. It's partly because of the geometric uniform arrangement of the chairs. It's partly because the whiteboard is not geometrically aligned appropriately. It's partly because the drinks fridge there has a big Coca-Cola sign on it and it's humming. It's partly because the pathway in which people will walk in there doesn't really allow for serendipitous encounters. It's very individual. There's a whole bunch of things that collectively aggregate into this vague and nebulous notion of vibe. And nebulosity is something I really love as a related word. Ambiguity, uncertainty, vagueness, nebulosity. Nebulosity is where you can see the shape of something, but you can't be grasped, like a cloud is nebulous. David Chapman of metarationality.org talks about nebulosity. It's a point at which a lot of STEM researchers get to with all of the theorems of engineering, of physics, of mathematics, of biology. Eventually, when you go deep enough, you start to realize that all of those constructs they serve a purpose, but the foundations that we thought they were built on aren't really there. And there's an inherent nebulosity. This doesn't mean it's nihilism, that nothing is meaningful, although that's a trap that many people fall into. It just means that there's an inherent meaningness to them. More on that, you can check out metarationality.com. But there's also a couple of other things. I want to get a little bit wizardry with you. I find myself fascinated by the occult these days, in the sense that some knowledge is intentionally gatekept. It relates a little bit to mystery, and this term mystery is something that modernity cannot tolerate, is mystery, the unknown. We want to colonize things. We want to map things. We want to make the unknown known. We want to explain things. But in the process of explaining things, we rob phenomena of much of their magic. The explanation is not quite the same as a poetic relational disposition. And there's this beautiful essay by Martin Shaw, the mythologist, Dr. Martin Shaw, on navigating the mysteries. And here the concept of navigation is much more poetic. It's worth reading.
So if you just want to make a mental note here and you want to find that article, it is online at the Emergence magazine. And I will also say Martin Shaw's newsletter is terrific.
But the ultimate thing I want to get to here, and this is me because I work across many different groups and different organizations and contexts, there's a frustration in that many people fixate upon the shining obvious thing, the thing that everyone's talking about. In this instance, it's artificial intelligence. And when you fixate upon something that's shining bright, it means that it's harder to see what exists in the penumbra. Your eyes need to take more time to adjust to what is emerging elsewhere. And often the big shining thing means that we are blinded to, or at least miss, some of the adjacent opportunities. We see this at the moment with Donald Trump and his antics. There's a lot of theatre involved with this. But I'm also quite convinced, and my friend Merlin Bowler also pointed this out, his reason is that we can't just pay attention to the central figure that's creating the distraction. And the wise and savvy amongst us have their acuity cast wide. We're paying attention to what is emerging. By paying attention or giving attention, it's curiosity, it's empathy, it's attunement to weak signals, it's active sense-making, it's comparing notes, it's epistemological humility, it's learning. And through that, we find a way. But there's this thing of mystery. Sometimes, I guess my point is, allow more room for mystery in your life. It can only do good for you.
Now, there's a section here from the original episode that I've edited out, and it gets into conversations around voids and anti-memes. And ironically, woven through this now absent section are deeply interrelated questions such as, well, what's missing? And what's been quieted? And what's been edited out? And what's hard to pay attention to? So if you're keen to hear more, you'll have to subscribe to Jason's podcast, which again, Fox Wizard, and this is episode 5. So we're going to jump forward a bit, and here Jason starts to wrap things up and starts talking about the importance of wit.
And part of having wit means you have associative knowledge. If you're quick-witted, if you're sharp-witted, and so on, all that essentially means is that you can pull disparate ideas together in a synthesized way that is relevant, timely, and apt. And my hope is that folks within organizations are cultivating in-house intelligence. And by that, you're actually cultivating genius. And by that, I'm talking about collective genius, mutual encouragement, the conditions that allow for flourishing and the development of each other as adolescents into adults. I'm not even sure if I'm an adult yet. I feel like we have much maturing to do. I feel like intelligence has vastly outpaced wisdom. And I feel like wisdom itself is an existential threat to most business models. And so the perverse incentives keep us from having the conversations at depth about this. And yet, that is where we need to go. So this has been a bit of a romp.
An excellent romp indeed, Jason. Be quick-witted, be sharp-witted, pull in wisdom, develop sensibilities, look beyond the obvious shiny thing into the shadows and the penumbra, sense the vibe, stay with ambiguity, create quivers of options, and all that in about 20 minutes or so.
My main point here is there's so much more than simply uncertainty when it comes to our unfurling future. And if you want to do strategy well, yes, plan to navigate uncertainty, do your scenario plannings and so forth. But alongside that, you might want to consider also cultivating the sensibilities, the capabilities, the savvy to flourish amidst ambiguity and the unknown. This will have you orientating towards relevance realization. It will have you cultivating a quiver of options, which allows you the optionality to be able to respond to emergent phenomena with a kind of grace that may outpace your competitors, if you believe in such a thing. And ultimately, it's the most enlivening thing we can do is to have curiosity, empathy, acuity for what is emerging and to orientate our actions so that we're moving towards real value, not just merely additional profits or incremental gains on existing systems, but actually what does value really mean? How might we contribute to the generation of that? I hope this has been a useful provocation for you. It was meant to be a 9-minute musing, but here we are. Enjoy your ambiguities, your nebulosities, your vagueness, your mysteries, your all of the things, and I'll see you next time.
So then, Dr. Jason Fox, you are welcome. You'll find more of his work at drjasonfox.com. I do love his book, in particular, How to Lead a Quest. Oh, just to say, don't mistake him for the former military dude now writing books, because that is a very different Jason Fox. I find when I listen to Jason, I have to let his words flow kind of through me and around me. Yes, I know that sounds woo-woo, but some of what Jason talks about, I don't quite understand. I mean, he literally has a PhD in philosophy, and I literally do not have a PhD in philosophy. So I am curious to know what struck you, what rang a bell for you in this episode. And if you'd like to tell me, you can email me at podcast@thechangesignal.com. And that's true for all the episodes, in fact. podcast@thechangesignal.com. I will read every email that goes there. So for this episode in particular, what felt most helpful? But also, what do you think of this different type of episode? It's an experiment where I'm taking wisdom from someone else and kind of traveling with you through that wisdom. Thanks for the love you're sharing about the podcast. Many of you have written reviews, given it stars on your favorite podcast platform, and many of you have recommended it to other change leaders, and I really appreciate that. Thank you, and I'm glad you're here.